Right. Okay. Yeah. You go. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Off you go.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Right. Soon after allowing the children of Israel to depart from Egypt, Pharaoh chases
Oh, sorry,
after
sorry,
them.
Iris. 1 second. Sorry. Beryl, are you on? Is Beryl
Yes,
on?
I am.
Oh, I just saw your message.
Yes,
Sorry.
I
Okay,
am.
great. Right. Sorry,
Yes,
Iris. Carry on.
I'm on.
Yes. Right.
Soon after allowing the children of Israel to depart from Egypt, Pharaoh chases after them to force their return, and the Israelites find themselves trapped between Pharaoh's armies and the sea. God tells Moses to raise his staff over the water. The sea splits to allow the Israelites to pass through, and then closes over the pursuing Egyptians. Moses and the children of Israel sing a song of praise and gratitude to God. Excuse me. In the desert, the people suffer thirst and hunger and repeatedly complain to Moses and Aaron. God miraculously sweetens the bitter waters of Marah, and later has Moses bring forth water from a rock by striking it with his staff. He causes manna to rain down from the heavens before dawn each morning, and quails to appear in the Israelite camp each evening.
1 sec. Yep.
The children of Israel are instructed to gather a double portion of manna on Friday, as none will descend on Shabbat, the divinely decreed day of rest. Some disobey and go to gather manna on the seventh day, but find nothing. Aaron preserves a small quantity of manna in a jar as a testimony for future generations. In Rephidim, the people are attacked by the Amalekites, who are defeated by Moses' prayers and an army raised by Joshua.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Anyone know the joke about the guys from, I'm sure I've told it before, the guys, 3 guys from Chalm have a race, right? See who can race across the river. So the first guy gets a quarter of the way, starts floundering, goes back to the beginning. Second guy gets just under halfway, says, I can't make it, and goes back to the beginning. Third guy gets 3/4 of the way, says, I'm not going to make it, and he swims back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. Beginning of the Parsha starts with this, what seems like a simple proposal. Who'd like to read number 1? Anyone?
If you like.
Yep.
When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not leave them on the road through the land of the Philistines, though it was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their mind and return to Egypt. So God let the people around by the desert road towards the Red Sea. The Israelites went up and out of Egypt, prepared for battle.
Right. We know they actually went the long way, right?
Yeah. Can you the Red Sea or the Reed Sea? I mean, you know, the tourist.
Yeah, I know.
Is it the same sea? What is the Reed?
Is that, yeah, it's the same sea. The real translation is reed. Yam Suf. Yeah, Suf is a reed. I'm not sure. I think we often think, I don't know where Red Sea came from. In the Torah, it's the Yam Suf. Could have been a corruption. Is it actually? It's not red, is it?
No.
I mean, they call it the Red Sea today, but Yam Suf, a Suf is a reed, the Reed Sea. Don't know. Let's have a look. 1 second.
I think the commentary said something about the Red Sea was longer in those days, and it was a sort of marshy, shallow water with reeds growing in it, and it was much shallower and had very shallow parts which more or less could have been crossing points where water, where there was, if there was a very low water or strong wind or something, the ground might be exposed.
Okay, so quick Google search.
That's what I read on Shabbos,
right.
in the Siddur.
Right.
I mean
Chumash.
Chumash.
So quick Google search seems that they crossed actually Suez, which makes sense because that we know where that is. Which alternately is part of the Red Sea, or alternatively, there's a suggestion that actually the Sea of Reeds, the Yam Suf, was actually a lake somewhere different to the modern, a very large lake, but somewhere different to the modern. No, sorry, it wouldn't have been a very large lake. Sorry, Red Sea. Yeah, so different to the modern Red Sea. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
that's what I was thinking. That's what I meant by it was an extension which is now dried.
It's 2 each.
That's what I think it said in the Chumash.
Yeah, it seems it was also called the Egyptian Sea as well, or just the sea actually sometimes, right? The sea. Yeah. So whether red is a corruption of reed or it's completely different, I'm not sure. And here, of course, they put Red Sea just to confuse you, right? The question is why it's called the Red Sea nowadays. So not 100% sure.
I also read that was something to do with the color of the corals in the sea.
Makes sense. Definitely makes sense. So you can do some research on that. There's quite a lot on Google, just the first few things. Okay, they didn't go the coastal route, which would have been most direct. The reason given is that basically that was also probably most exposed. It was the main highway, right? It's more likely that people would have been attacked. It was fortified. Okay, fine. But was the alternative route safer? They saw the Egyptian chariots and they were terrified, right? So they still had fear. I'm just looking for the source for this original point. Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, it's from the Koran Chumash Tanakh, evidently it discusses, but I don't have it in front of me. Okay, so why would they change their minds? Because they might be attacked or they might fear attack. So this is the quiet route round the back and so on. Number one, they ended up seeing the Egyptian chariots, which is still pretty scary and it did frighten them. Number two, if you say that this was a tactic to avoid war, to avoid possibly being attacked, because then they would just want to flee back to Egypt. It would be too easy for them to go back. Then why this? Let's have a look at number two. Who'd like to read number two?
I'll read that.
Yep.
So God led the people round about by way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. Now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt. Rashi, the word, what is
Chamush, chamushim, which is the word it uses for armed.
Chamushim means provided with weapons. Another explanation, only 1 out of 5
Chamisha.
went forth from Egypt, and 4 parts of the people died during the 3 days of darkness, because they were unworthy of being delivered.
Right, that's just I just wanted to clear that because it's something I mentioned over Shabbos. There is this midrash that says that 4/5 of the people basically had Stockholm syndrome. They didn't want to leave, and therefore they perished in the darkness. Art Scroll, which is always a bit more kind of hardcore. I noticed Art Scroll says that they wouldn't deserve redemption, and then ties that in with the wicked son. The way I always explain it in my Seder is that the father says to the wicked son, because of what God did for me when he took me out of Egypt, which is a quote directly from last week's Parsha, why me and not you? Because had you been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed. So the classic question is, what kind of a father says to his son, you're beyond redemption? Surely a father always never loses hope. So the answer I always understood was, he's not saying to his son, you wouldn't deserve, you would have been punished by being left behind. He's saying to his son, you would have been one of the people that didn't want to leave. You'd have been quite happy. You'd have had the Stockholm syndrome. You'd have enjoyed Egypt. You wouldn't have wanted to go out. You would have got used to Galut. But anyway, the Rashi here is that they were unworthy of being redeemed, and therefore they basically disappeared. Anyway, whatever, that's chamushim. Chamushim means basically armed. So we're told, this is actually the same quote as the previous one. I think I got the wrong verse number on the top. So we're told they were armed. So clearly there was an expectation. They had to be ready for war. They were already told to arm themselves. So what? Not only that, but who caused the whole problem in the first place? Whose fault is it that Pharaoh's chasing them in chariots? Who promised that it would happen? God, right? It's all foreseen. So, Hashem took them out of Egypt the roundabout way, so they wouldn't get scared. Okay, the explanation that they wouldn't, by taking them on a roundabout way, it would be harder for them to go back to Egypt because they'd be further away. Okay, that makes sense. The explanation that it's to avoid, trauma and war. But wait a minute, they were already armed, told to arm themselves. They see Pharaoh's army chasing them, and they're told that Pharaoh's going to chase them. Let's just see quote number 3. Right, we've quoted a few times recently. Who'd like to read number 3?
I will.
Go on.
Then I will stiffen Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, that I may gain glory through Pharaoh and all his host. And the Egyptians shall know that I'm the Lord. And they did so.
Right. So he said, I'll harden Pharaoh's heart. He'll end up chasing you. Right. So I will gain glory for myself because the defeat of the Egyptians at the sea would be a reminder of God's power. The Egyptians will know I am Lord. They will realize that there's a force more powerful than their military. But right at the beginning, said that Hashem took them out to a roundabout way because he said otherwise they may want to return to Egypt. So which is it? Is his concern with their sense? Right, let's just go back to that quote to be clear, because I missed that myself. Hashem himself says that Hashem said to himself, as it were, if they face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. So no, they shouldn't face war. I'll take them basically around the back roads. But wait a minute, you told them to arm themselves. Not only that, but you told them Pharaoh's going to chase them. So you're worried about, which is it? You're worried about them facing war. That makes more sense. Then why did you orchestrate the whole performance? Have Pharaoh never chase them in the first place? Right? And you're worried that they're going to say they want to. So number one, just a few points. Number one, you're saying that you want to spare them war, so you take on a roundabout route, but actually, surely, roundabout route is always more traumatic because it's going to take longer. You're going to see the chariots chasing you. You're going to have a better view of them because you've gone around in a loop sort of thing, rather than having to look behind you. It's actually not going to help you. Number two, why tell them to arm themselves? Number three, why engineer Pharaoh chasing them in the first place? Number four, you said that you don't want, Hashem says he doesn't want them to say, let us return to Egypt. But actually, anyone know what they say?
I said it anyway.
Right, what do they say? Who would like to read number 4?
I read,
Tom?
was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt?
Right.
Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert.
Oh, there we go. So they said that anyway. Let's go back to Egypt. They were afraid. So it seems to have all failed so far. Right? It's all a bit of a disaster. Right. Also, if you're trying to steal them for battle, right? What ends up happening in the end? How are the Egyptians defeated?
The water came in.
They drown, right?
drowned
Yes.
them.
Right. And until they drown, the children of Israel are panicking. It's not a military victory, it's a miraculous godly victory. Let's see. Right? What does Moshe say to the people when they're afraid? He doesn't say, don't worry, we will go and wage battle and God will be with us. He basically says, rely on miracles, right? Who would like to do number 5? Anyone who hasn't read yet? Who's on? Oh,
I'll read.
please, Deborah.
Morning.
Oops. Just need to move this. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still.
Right. Well, that's not a great military strategy, is it? Right. I'm sure I've told you, I think it's an urban legend. I'm sure I've told the story before I heard years ago. I think it was in the University of Kentucky or somewhere in a slightly more obscure place in America. And they were doing a course on military history. And they went through like, the 100 Years' War and the Korean War and the Vietnam War and the Boer War and World War I and World War II. And I don't know, whatever, 100 Years' War and this one and that one. And the end of the course, they had I think it was an Israeli student. So he went up to the professor and he says, you know, what have you got against my country? He says, what do you mean? He says, you know, we've had more wars in the 20th century than any other country in the world, and you don't mention any of them, you know. And so the story goes, the professor said, there's absolutely no point. So because on paper, none of them make sense, right? The War of Independence, you have a bunch of, you know, concentration camp, malnourished concentration camp survivors being attacked by 7 Arab armies, you know, none of it makes any sense. So on paper, it doesn't make sense. So it's all miraculous. So military strategy doesn't help. So I'm sure having the right people and the right equipment helps, but you know, it's a perspective. So the same thing here, right? Moshe said to people, "Don't worry, Hashem will deliver you." Well, okay. On the one hand, that's very reassuring. On the other hand, we say we try to do things in a natural way, you know, on our own. Hishtadlut, you know. So arm yourselves. But by the way, the only way you'll actually defeat power is that God drowns him. Okay, what happens if next time around God doesn't want to drown him? Slightly worrying. How does that teach any kind of strength or courage? It just teaches faith in God. Fine, but it's you know, it's a strange one, isn't it? Right? So much so is that miracle celebrated that every day we sing the Song of the Sea, right? It has a special tune. Interesting fun fact, by the way. One of the things that came out of the merger, which I discovered, was that there are 2 ways of doing the Shirah, the Song of the Sea, when you lay in. So there is a special trot, a special set of notes we use for the 10 Commandments. I can't think how it goes now. Thank you very much. Yeah. וידבר אלוקים את כל הדברים האלה לאמור. יבואי לשומרים מצוותיי לא תרצח. So there are those that basically do the shira to that tune. Shira Lashem ki ga susur l'chma rama v'yam, which is the kind of Ashkenazi way of doing it. Hashem ish milchama, Hashem shamai. The Sephardi way of doing it is to what is known as Bendigamos, which is Oz Yoshim Hashem. Yep. Et Asher Azos LaHashem Vayomru Lehemor. I don't know if it's originally a Sephardic tune, but it's now used. If you ever go to a Sephardi occasion, when they bench, they sing. I think it's very beautiful, actually. It's Bendigamos. Bendigamos means let us bless. Bendigamos el Altissimo. That's the only Spanish I know, Ladino. Let us give thanks to the one above, Altissimo, the one on high. But I think they sing it for benching after Shem Others. I don't know if people actually do it, but it's in their bencher. Da 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 da. Hodu la Hashem kitov kilio long chaso. Hodu la Hashem kitov kilio long chaso. Been to a couple of Sephardi weddings where they do it. Anyway, so Wanston Woodford used to do the Ashkenazi one. Boundary Road used to do the Sephardi one. So what we're going to do? So I did a bit of research because I'd actually, the shuls I've been in previously just did the Ashkenazi tune. I always thought it was perhaps a mistake because it was Sephardic and whatever. Anyway, I asked Time Binstock, and it emerges who were the original Jews in this country? Spanish and Portuguese, right? So although most of our nusach that we have is actually Polish or German, there are certain places where it seems a concession was basically made to the Spanish and Portuguese origins of Anglo Jewry, and this was one of them. So the official, what they do in St. John's Wood, the height of high table, what do they call it? High church, not whatever. High synagogue orthodoxy is they do the Sephardi tune. Interestingly, so I do the Sephardi tune. Anyway, so we say every day it's cause for celebration. So and finally, and yet it's a miracle. Miraculous victory is not a good military strategy. Oops, what just happened there? I have no idea what just happened. Oh, sorry. Right, we're back. No, that's it. Right. And finally, actually, the Sedra ends with another battle, which I forgot to put on the slides, which is the battle against Amalek. And interestingly, the battle against Amalek, there is no fear or trauma or complaint. Joshua leads them into battle, supported by Aaron and Hur, right? And Moses, they stand and they hold Moses' hands up, and the people are inspired and they're strengthened and they prevail, but they prevail in battle. It's not there may be a miraculous element to the holding of Moses' hands I saw recently, by the way, you know how a lot of quotes originate from Tanakh, right? Like being a thorn in the side. It says that we were a thorn in the children of Israel were a thorn in Pharaoh's side. That's where the phrase thorn in the side comes from. I saw somewhere a phrase that came from this holding up the hands, a phrase that's colloquial. I don't remember what it was. So we start off with fear. God's worried that they're going to be fearful and they're going to want to go back to Egypt. And we end up actually with actual battle where actually they do quite well. So what's changed? Why is it at the beginning of Sedra, Hashem says, I'm worried that they'll cave in too easily and they'll just want to go back to Egypt. I want to make it more difficult for them. And yet by the end, when actually they have to work hard and they have to go and fight Amalek, but nonetheless, they don't complain and they're not traumatized. We're not told that they're fearful. They actually manage to do it themselves. So faced by the Egyptians, they panic and say we should never have left Egypt. When yet when they face the Amalekites, they actually win the battle. So what changed? This is the question.
Faith in Hashem.
More faith? Okay, maybe. Anything else?
Maybe they had more training to fight in the meantime. Being
Maybe.
slaves to being armed soldiers.
Right, let's read.
Amalek
Sorry.
are a lot less fearsome than the Egyptian army.
Maybe. Let's have a look at the Roman strategy. Right, crossing the Rubicon. Who would like to read?
Okay, I'll read again.
Tom.
Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon River on January the 10th, 49 BCE, precipitated the Roman Civil War, which ultimately led to Caesar's becoming a dictator and the rise of the imperial era of Rome. Caesar had been appointed to governorship over a region that ranged from southern Gaul to Illyricum, not Italy, as his term of governmentship ended. The Roman Senate ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome. He was explicitly ordered not to take his army across the Rubicon River, which was at the time the boundary of Italy. In January of 49 BC, Caesar brought the 13th Legion across the river, which the Roman government considered insurrection, treason, and a declaration of war on the Roman Senate. According to some authors, he is said to have uttered the phrase "Alia."
I have no idea how you read that. Any Latin scholars here?
Alia iapta est.
Thank you.
And die in cast. The die is cast as his army marched through the shallow river. Today, the phrase crossing the Rubicon is a metaphor that means to pass a point of no return.
Right. So sometimes you have an event which basically is crossing the point of no return. Once you've crossed the point of no return, right, unlike the guy in Chelm who went all the way back, you know that you have to carry on. You have no choice, right? Sometimes that is what, people vote to go on strike or somebody quits their job without having another job to go to. They now know that they have no choice. There's no going back, right? So let's just see another example. So I got this, yes, right. So let's look at burning bridges. Okay, who would like to read about burning bridges?
Shall I do that now again?
Yeah.
Origin. The positive form of this expression, burn your bridges, goes back to ancient Roman times. In those days, when armies crossed a river to invade a new land or territory, the commanding generals would order the bridges burned in order to ensure that their troops couldn't and wouldn't retreat. Another such incident was in 1519 CE, during the Spanish conquest of Mexico. Hernán Cortés, the Spanish commander, scuttled his ships so that his men would have to conquer or die. Also mentioned in the Roman myth of Aeneas, who burned his boats after conquering territory in Italy.
Right. So it's funny. We talk about don't burn your bridges in the sense of don't don't damage your relationships or whatever. But here as a positive strategy, you burn your bridges so that you have no choice but to carry on. Right? The suggestion is, why would you do this? This would be very, demoralizing for an army. The answer presumably is that sometimes by creating no way out, you actually make people stronger, because when they have no way out, they will face up to things. Whereas if they have an out, they'll take that out. It's only when they have no way of retreating that they then have to face their fears. So what all these things have in common, I'm sure there's many other examples. Sometimes you have to make sure that there's no way back. There's no way of retreat. You can't run away in fear. It's a very radical way of doing things, but it would explain the logic of this week's Parsha. Before they cross the sea, they're fearful. They cross the sea, there's no way back. Yes, they complain about water and food. When it comes to Amalek, they show completely different attitude to the Egyptians. So some of you said they have more faith in God, or Amalek wasn't as scary. No, Amalek was pretty horrible, right? They picked off the weak and the women and children. They weren't nice people. I don't know exactly how they differed from. Also, the Egyptians have good reason to be angry with them. You could kind of understand. Amalek, they did nothing to them. So could be all of those things. Could also be that they burned their bridges. They couldn't, once they cross the sea, it's not going to happen again. The sea's not going to split again for them. We assume, right? So they have to look forwards. So I didn't manage to put it on the screen, but the Rashbam, you can look this up, actually, really interesting. I don't remember who the Rashbam is. I think he was Rashi's son-in-law. There was a point in the Talmud where Rashi died, basically in the middle of his commentary. I think it's in the tractate of Pesachim, which deals with Pesach. And the Rashbam takes over the commentary. I think it's his son-in-law. I think it's Rashi's son-in-law. Anyway, he says that sorry, one sec. Says that when Jacob wrestles with the angel, when Moshe, right, when it says God wanted to kill him because he hadn't circumcised his son, when Jonah's on a stormy ship, the Rashbam says all of these examples are basically where someone has no way back, right? They're being attacked, they've got no way back. But actually, when they have no way back, it forces them to face their fears. It's an interesting perspective. You're going to have fear, but when you have no choice and there's no way back, you will actually find it easier sometimes to move forward. This is what Kafka said.
Well, breaking up, Rabbi, for some reason, for
Yes,
me at any rate.
Yeah,
It's
Andros.
my internet, one sec. Better or worse? Any better? Is that any better?
Can't hear you.
Any better or worse?
Lost you entirely now.
I can hear you. Is that better or worse? Horrible.
Still no.
We can't hear you.